it looks like ENFP, which seems to fit pretty much with my academic personality. I sort of have academic ADD. I get bored pretty quickly and move on to the next thing. So, and- yeah, and my wife is definitely the J. So, and I think it fits with my Enneagram, which is a 7. Yeah, Epicure or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so I think those are my fits pretty well. 5 elements. Um, I'm somewhere between. I'm definitely not an earth or a metal. Uh, yeah, I vacillate between water, wood, and fire. And if I've got a red shirt on today, which is fire, I tend to be somewhere between wood and fire, and I do have some water component as well. So, but my wife is all over on the metal side, of course. So. Yeah, that makes sense. That David would be metal. Yeah, yeah. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in 1995. Sagittarius. No, I think so. Yeah. Well, Pittsburghs are known as Yinzers. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yinzer. Well, since I moved from Pittsburgh to North Carolina to go to undergrad at Duke, um, I learned to say y'all. But in, yeah, I know, I know. And then in Pittsburgh though we say, "What would Yins like to do?" So if you're from Pittsburgh, you're called a Yinzer. And it's Yins. I think came from Ewans. What would Ewans like to do? Well, I mean, I went from Pittsburgh in high school to Duke for 4 years, got my taste of the South, and then I went back to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia for the next med school residency fellowship and my first job, and then eventually made my way back down here via Virginia Beach to North Carolina. So I made a big circle. So yeah, obviously, I mean, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I learned to hate the snow, so I love being down here where there's very little snow, and I don't really like cold. As a fire person, I tend to not like cold weather. So we were Presbyterians, which I don't know if you've heard the term for Presbyterians, the frozen chosen. Never heard that one before. So yes, the Presbyterians, they follow all the rules. It's a very capitalistic model of Protestantism. So you go to church school, you go to church camp, and it was fairly regimented and not. It certainly wasn't evangelical or anything else. I don't know who's calling me. I'm just gonna let it ring. Hang on. Actually, my wife's mother just died, so let me make sure this isn't her. So, hello. Good. My wife is not here. Do you need to give a message to her or? Yeah, I think it did, but I'll have her get, if you want to send her an email or something, she'll get back to you. Okay? Bye bye. It was just a service call. Yeah, her mother died of dementia just a couple hours ago, so it's a huge relief. And she had a dream last night that she died, so she was warned. And so that was it's really a blessing. And of course, it's still the final closure is still difficult, but she's quite relieved, I think. So. Yeah, and she couldn't speak much for the last year, so Yeah, we were there visiting this summer, and it was difficult. The only thing she responded to was a phrase that Dagmar remembered that her grandmother used to say. That's the only thing she responded to. She laughed, and that was it. But no other no, she made eye contact, but nothing else. So yeah, we've been waiting for this to happen. So it happened just a couple hours ago. So. Uh, so my family, my father was a physicist, and my mother was a homemaker, and my dad was sort of kind of from the naturalistic perspective. He grew up he was a hunter in Minnesota, and his church was taking us for hikes outdoors, and my mother sang in the choir, did all the usual stuff. I was born again twice. I was born again in high school through the Young Life program, and I was born again in college through Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and it didn't stick either time. So now I follow sort of a Native American eco spirituality kind of path. One of my guides for spirituality is Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. So. I mean, Teilhard was considered sort of the father of eco spirituality. So, and fits well with the Native American approach to being connected to the earth and other people. So. I've had well, my brother was always obsessed with Native American traditions growing up, and when we played Cowboys and Indians, I would always be the cowboy, he would be the Indian, and he's had a influence on me over the years, and has a relationship with quite a number of people in the Lakota tribe out in South Dakota on Pine Ridge, and he's taken me out there multiple times, and I've developed my own connection there. So I've had Lakota teachers, and I've also got a local Cherokee teacher here in North Carolina. So. One of our friends actually went up, the Jeff Ironclad went up there and actually was part of the process. We kept track of what was going on, and sent some money up there, but that was about it. So. Yeah, and actually my first shamanic teacher was actually a radiologist, another holistic radiologist who introduced me to drumming, and yeah, and I met the jaguar right after my dad had died. So. Well, I mean, the strange thing was, is I came to Duke in '73 as an undergrad, expecting to sign up for a course on parapsychology because my little sister takes credit for having given me my first ESP book in high school. And apparently, I had read something about it in Psychology Today, and thought that I could take a course at Duke, and spent the summer looking for a parapsychology course in the card catalog, in the course catalog, and there wasn't one. And then I realized later that Dr. Ryan had moved the parapsychology lab off campus 10 years before, and had severed all his connections to Duke. So I never went there during my undergrad years, and sort of missed out on that whole being able to meet the Ryans. But when I came back to the medical center in '93, I'd had a lot of metaphysical experiences in Philadelphia and Virginia Beach. And then that was the first place I went. So I've been connected to the Rhine Center ever since 1993. So, yeah, no, that was Dr. Rhine's claim to fame. And it's still an ongoing research laboratory, and we have a lot of community activities. We have a monthly psychic experience group that I always go to, and I help lead a dream group there. And we have lectures every other Friday night of either a famous psychic or a famous scientist. And that's been a valuable resource, sort of my local community here. But I think my metaphysical awakening happened in Philadelphia when I moved there in 1986. Also coincided with the harmonic convergence, which happened that summer. Watching Shirley MacLaine's Out on a Limb miniseries, which was way ahead of its time. Discovering my first metaphysical bookstore, and my dad getting cancer, and me starting to look for guiding him on an alternative path. All those things happened in the same year, and I joined the Magnetic Resonance Imaging Safety Committee, where I was concerned about the health effects of electromagnetic fields and patients who were claustrophobic in the MRI scanner. So I wound up learning hypnosis for the claustrophobia issues, and I wound up learning acupuncture due to the electromagnetic field interest that I developed. So those 1987, 86, 87 was a big year for me. So. Yeah, we're getting a lot of evidence-based studies on acupuncture in the last 20, 30 years, and EFT is just starting to catch up and having its own evidence base. But the ironic thing about all that is that the acupuncturists, my wife including, will tell you that all those studies are great, but they have no impact whatsoever on how they practice acupuncture, and they're really just to entertain the Western left brain. So. Yeah, I think it's a flow of energy through the connective tissue system, like Jim Oshman and other people have described, and it does have to do with electrical conductivity, maybe superconductivity in the semiconducting system through the myelin sheaths that Robert Becker described years ago. And so, yeah, I think there's a real physical component to it, and there's probably more of a metaphysical, energetic component as well. So. Yeah. I guess I would maybe think of a better term for placebo might be inner healer. It's like, whatever it takes to activate your inner healer. If it can be the power of suggestion that you're taking this pill that really has no effect, but it has a potent suggestion associated with it, then it's whatever your body's innate ability to heal gets activated. So I would say that the placebo effect is what we're always attempting to activate. And there's some ways of doing it better than others. So. Yeah, and I was also thinking about what else happened in 1987. And I realized that's when I started keeping a dream diary too. So that was been 30 years of dream diarying, and the synchronicities started happening in 1987 too. I can't say that I had a lot of awareness of anything like that during my 8 years in Pittsburgh, or 9 years in Pittsburgh. When I got to Philadelphia, just everything seemed to open up for me. So. Oh, I've got my book is full of them. So let me just mention one of the time when I really became aware that something magical was happening, and that's when my first book, Let Magic Happen. When I say magic, I refer to synchronicities. Really, I don't know any magic tricks or any stage magic. So my first real wake up call to that was going to interview for a job in Virginia Beach from Philadelphia, and wondering if I was making the right choice. Had just finished a long day of interviews, stayed in a hotel near the Edgar Cayce Center, the ARE, that I'd been reading about for years, but had never been there. Thought, well, maybe there was a chance I would get over there to visit while I was having these interviews. And I did 2 interviews in 2 days, and then I was pretty tired, finished dinner, was getting on the elevator in the hotel, to go up to my room, and 2 people got on the elevator with me, and they both had ARE name tags on, and they were obviously attending a conference at the Edgar Cayce Center. So I just said, "Oh, what's the conference on?" And they said, "Oh, it's on near-death experiences and UFO encounters, all together in one workshop." And I thought, "Oh, that was cool." And I said, interestingly, I had just sponsored a lecture on near-death experiences at Thomas Jefferson University, where I was working in Philadelphia, for the medical students as their faculty sponsor. But I'd had to babysit my young daughter that night and couldn't go to the lecture. But I heard it was really good. It was by Ken Ring, a famous near-death experience researcher. And then, of course, Ken reaches out and says, "Well, sorry you missed my lecture. And why don't you come to the rest of the workshop we're having tomorrow?" And then the other woman on the elevator goes, "Oh, that's really strange. I just moved here from Philadelphia, and last summer I went to a lecture at your university by a radiologist who's talking about electromagnetic fields and healing." And I said, yeah, that was me. So it was a double hit, double synchronicity. I call those double synchronicities, which boost the odds of it happening by chance, in the exponential level. And when one of those happens to me, and they have occasionally over the years, I know that I'm in the right place at the right time, doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So, yeah. Yeah. I guess when I was co-founding the Duke Integrated Medicine Center, I was always pushing the envelope. I guess kind of like my Myers-Briggs or my Enneagram would suggest, or my Sagittarius, I guess, whatever. I was following that attitude of pushing the envelope, and I eventually the envelope started to push back at Duke, and they attempted to fire me, and went through some real turmoil, and wound up coming out on the other side, managing not to burn my bridges, and working through it such that when I finally wrote my book about it, everybody liked the book. Now, I have to admit, I had to edit the book rather severely, because my first issue I sent to my mindfulness meditation director and said, "What do you think of this chapter on the founding of Duke Integrated Medicine?" And he goes, "Oh, you have a great memory. I hope you have a good lawyer." And so I had to go back and edit out the anger out of the chapter about how the powers that be were pushing back at me, pushing the envelope. So that I was a loose cannon, I think. Yeah, I was just out of control. I was pushing out of control, stretching the envelope. Not doing it the Duke way, and that sort of thing. So. Well, usually whenever I present any of this stuff in an academic environment, I present it with a sense of humor, so they walk away going, "Was he serious, or was he joking?" So that's been a defense mechanism that's helped me cope with some of that. And the other thing is just creating relationships with people, and particularly in my case, relationships with important benefactors who supported me when I was stretching the envelope. So, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That was major trauma for me all through junior high and early high school. And looking back on that, I was also deathly afraid of public speaking. And I was on track to be the valedictorian at my high school and realized my junior year that I had to find some way to sabotage my grade point average my senior year. So I signed up for public speaking and acting classes, which were the most valuable classes I took in high school. And I got, B's in them instead of A's, and dropped my grade point average just enough so I didn't have to give any talks. But now I thrive on public speaking, so that was a sort of a roundabout way of creating a breakthrough for myself. So. Yeah, and the other thing that was interesting was I since I was always labeled, the straight A student brain kid in high school, I made a big push to become a good athlete so that when I wound up coming down to Duke as a pole vaulter, and I got on campus and realized, well, most other people were just as smart as I was, but I was the best pole vaulter on campus. So that I became the jock when I got to college. So that was kind of fun. So. Oh, that was in Philadelphia when my first like metaphysical store that I ever or workshop that I went to. The guy had a float tank, which is filled with water that's got a lot of salt in it. It's like being in the Dead Sea. You float right up on top of the water. And then they put earplugs in and they close you in this cocoon that's all dark. So you're in a sensory deprivation state, and it puts you into deep relaxation. It's somewhat disorienting, and I can't say that I had any real altered states of consciousness, fantastic experiences there, but it was an interesting way to kind of get out of my head a little bit. So yeah, and I just watched the movie Altered States with William Hurt, who is based on John Lilly's research on float tanks, but he was actually doing psychedelic drugs in the float tanks. So I hadn't had that experience till much later in my life. So holotropic breath work, and that's based on the work of Stan Groff. One of my best friends here, who I used to teach stress management with, was certified by Groff in holotropic breath work, and it's essentially Groff was one of the first LSD researchers, and when they banned LSD, he discovered he could recreate some of the same effects by just having people hyperventilate for an extended period of time. And he would have, in a typical holotropic breathwork session done for 3 hours, you would hyperventilate for an hour. You just breathe deeper and faster. So you're breathing deep, not just shallow like a breath of fire. So you're breathing deeply and fast, and you do that for as long as you can, and it's done to rhythmic driving jungle type music, stimulating your breathing. And then the second hour is transcendent movie themes, where you're being lifted up out of your body, and then the third hour is more mellow, integrating type music, and that's a very transformative experience. It's also been packaged as rebirthing and things like that as well. So, yeah. Not so much. They were just transformative, and it definitely is another way of getting out of your head. And I would also have a lot of experience in my body shaking, so it was more like a Kundalini type experience for me. So, yes. My wife and I started doing kayaking and biking too, so that's all been a lot of fun. two daughters. One's a pediatric resident in her pediatric residency. The other one's a high school teacher. Well, I got divorced back in 2003 from their mother, so and we essentially grew apart over the years because I was started out as a conventional radiologist and went into holistic medicine. She started out as a pediatric oncologist and went into general pediatrics. So we kind of diverged apart that way. So, and then my second wife is an acupuncturist, Chinese herbalist. So it's a different match. Well, interesting enough, my two daughters are some of the most pure Chinese five element characters I've experienced. My one daughter is totally water, and the other is totally wood. So it's fascinating to watch them experience their own elements as they grow up, which has been very interesting for all of us. So. Yeah, I was there for 2 years in Virginia Beach, so I got immersed in it for a while I was there, and did a little bit of dabbled in having a couple past life regression experiences. I mean, you have to do that if you're in Virginia Beach for a period of time. So I did enjoy doing that, and still find that work to be very valuable. I was some of my interests in sort of the what you could call it crypto archaeology, or the hidden history, the prehistory of the civilizations of Atlantis and Egypt were stimulated by being connected to the Edgar Cayce Center. So. Um, let's see if there's. I had a couple different experiences. One was, which I write about in the book. When I was in Virginia Beach, one of my best friends was talking to. I think I called their house. His wife answered the phone, who was very psychic, and she said, "It's that garden guy again." And I never met her, and Bob was trying to figure out who the hell she was talking about, and she realized he made the connection between what she was saying and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, me having some sort of past life connection. And I explored that a little bit through the past life experience, which was interesting. And when I discovered Teilhard, I went through all of his books and picked out important quotes and used them for the beginning for each of the chapters in my book. So I kind of felt like I found my voice. I used to write a newspaper column for the Duke campus newspaper and I called it the Noosphere, which was Teilhard's concept of the consciousness of the earth. So that was pretty valuable experience for me. Now I have no idea what my connection to him is, but it was pretty compelling at the time in Virginia Beach. So. Yeah, and I've done a lot of dream work, and especially when I'm in crisis or transition, it's very valuable. But I also just find that the most entertaining part of keeping a dream diary is following my precognitive dreams, because I have a lot of dreams about what's going to happen, and then it happens, and I like that. So, yeah, I was. There was a period, I don't know, 20 years ago, where I was dreaming about tornadoes all the time. And in North Carolina, we don't have many tornadoes, but every time I would dream about a tornado, we would have one the next day. So it was very dramatic. And one time I was even in Florida on a trip, and I dreamed that a tornado was going to hit the terminal at the Raleigh Durham Airport. And the next day, my flying home, my plane was delayed because the tornado had torn the top off the terminal. So, and I like precognitive dreams because it causes anyone who has them to question whether they really understand how the universe works or not. You know. Well, yeah, I spend a lot of time hanging out with near-death experiencers ever since that Ken Ring experience, and a lot of them come back and say, well, you know, there is no linear time; it's all an illusion, and everything's happening at once. And then I've read, you know, obviously Dean Radin's book about the pre-sentiment experiments, where people document that, you know, in real repeatable experiments, people can sense the future at least a few seconds in advance. Yeah, no one can explain how you can sense it weeks in advance or months in advance, but obviously time is not what we think it is. So, I mean, it probably plays into it, but I hate when metaphysical people invoke the term quantum to explain what they're doing when they're not a physicist and they don't really know what it means. Quantum healing this, quantum that. It just becomes a little too imprecise use of the term, I think. Yeah, yeah, no, no, that's useful, but I want to be a little judicious of how we use the word because otherwise, people who are real scientists can get turned off if this quantum and that quantum thing, you know. So I, I prefer to think it more about like you said, non-local consciousness. Everything is connected. Um, and you know the indigenous traditions have been teaching us that for millennia, and of course science is just catching up now and putting scientific terms to it. So well, I think it's more that the Lakota word is Miyatake Awasan, means uh, we are all related. You know, it's like, and so everything is connected. And probably the best popular illustration of that is it was the popular theme song for the Disney movie Pocahontas, which was Paint with All the Colors of the Wind, which does a marvelous job of illustrating a shamanic journey and the connection of everything in a children's, you know, version of it, which was really elegantly done. So, and I also think keeping things metaphysical, that, you know, it's the great mystery, the great spirit, however you want to refer to the uniting consciousness of the planet. That's up to the individual. Everyone has their own spin on it, and all the different religions have their own take on it. And it's kind of like the people feeling the elephant and describing all the different parts of the elephant. No one has the whole picture. So, you know. I'd say occasionally, for me, mostly, as a radiologist, my skill is pattern recognition. I've been doing this for 35 years, so I can recognize any pattern in the body almost automatically. There are occasional times when I'll pull a whole story together because I know where to look to find when my intuition guides me to look for other things that might not be related to the original reason why. But like for example, sometimes I'll be reading an X-ray of the spine, and it will be for someone with back pain, and usually it would just be a bad disc or something like that. But occasionally I'll find a cancer, which is unexpected, and like a metastatic cancer, and then I'll look at elsewhere on the image, and I'll find the kidney cancer where the tumor came from, or the lung cancer, or something like that, and sort of put the whole story together just like that. So that happens occasionally. Yeah, I had a couple friends who had that experience, and it was intrigued me because I'd never really heard anything about it. And then I had a third friend who had a similar experience, but unfortunately, her doctor just dismissed the dream, and she wound up dying of metastatic breast cancer, which inspired me to do a little bit more research and start to study it, so that didn't happen to other women would have their dreams dismissed by their doctors. So that's one of the goals of the book that I wrote on dreams that can save your life, and still doing more research on that. Well, I tell people at least you can take them a copy of my paper, which is published in a scientific journal, and show that this is actually a thing, and they should at least think twice about it before they dismiss it. So. Yeah, I gave a TEDx talk which got censored, by the way. It's on my website. It has a red banner on it with a disclaimer by TED that this does not meet their scientific approval. But I knew in the TED talk I would have to answer that question: is what's the mechanism of transferring this information? And there are three different possibilities. One was that the women in the study just were in denial. They had some symptoms, and the body and subconscious translated into a dream to penetrate through their denial and confirm that they had a problem. That's the simplest explanation from a Western medicine point of view. The second would be they really didn't have any symptoms, but there's some subtle signaling system, subtle energies or neurologic or some way that the subconscious was able to pick up on it and turn it into a dream. But the third explanation is the most woo-woo from the conventional point of view, and that's that there's an intuitive process going on, which would explain why some of the women in the study would have a white-coated doctor come and tell them that they had a breast cancer as a guide in their dream, and then a week later or two they would meet that doctor or a nurse in real life and realize that they had met them before in the dream. So that starts to bend all the laws of physics and everything that we understand. So that that makes it a bit more mysterious, but on some level we're all connected. So whether you know them or not. So yes, it's possible. I have other stories about people doing that, and I've done it myself. So yeah, I'm not surprised. Right. Other people do it obviously are more of a waking and intuitive state to pick up hear voices or have images or there's many different ways of being, clairaudient or clairvoyant or whatever else you want to call it. So yeah. Uh, no, I've been interested in studying medical intuition for years. It turns out to be very difficult to prove scientifically. I've attempted to do it, only had very limited success, and few other people have had any success either. So, but it is a real phenomenon, and yes, it could be very valuable if it was incorporated more into our medical system. So. Well, you have to set up the experiment in such a way that it satisfies both the scientists, the open-minded scientists, the intuitives themselves, and the skeptics. So it has to be an airtight design, and that turns out to be pretty difficult to do. So, well, the first book, Let Magic Happen, was self-published, and it was I got inspired to do that just because I was telling all these synchronistic stories I'd accumulated over the years and realized I should start writing them down before I lose any of the details. And so it sort of documents my journey from conventional MRI scanning into holistic medicine. And I devote a chapter to a variety of the techniques that I learned, including hypnosis, acupuncture, EFT, and a few other things, dreams. And so I attempt to weave in some of the science that goes along with that, and then have an appendix with 10 self-healing mind, body, spirit techniques at the end. And on my website, I've got, for anyone who subscribes to my newsletter, I send them a little top 10 list of those techniques with a little video for each one so they can teach themselves how to do it. And then in the second book, that came about through a collaboration with Kat O'Keefe Cannabis, who was one of the women in my breast cancer study. And she felt like she was safe from breast cancer to come back on a mission and get the word out about keeping track of your dreams for your health. And so she and I partnered up, and we included half the women from the Breast Cancer Project in the book with their stories in great detail. And then we asked for stories about other types of illness. Most of the types of other stories we got were about cancer. There were a few other types of illness in the book, and there are also some really interesting stories just about using dreams for healing. So those are the two books. We're planning probably to do another dream book, and then I'll probably do a few other ideas down the road. Well, we're getting more and more stories from people, so it'll probably be similar to the last one, only with different types of cancer and different stories. So. I'm getting interested in the intersection between my dream research and dream work and the tapping, the EFT, emotional freedom technique that I do. And so probably at some point, I'm starting to give lectures on healing yourself with dreaming and tapping. So that's sort of where I'm going now. Because I just had a client this morning who was working with tapping with me, and we're working through different issues that she had in the different chakras. The lower three chakras are particularly important because they're often out of balance from people's trauma that they accumulate growing up. And then she was having dreams that spoke specifically to the different chakras that were out of balance. And then we designed the tapping based on what the dream was telling us to do. So that's the most exciting thing I'm doing at the moment. So. Um, I was introduced to it by Cheryl Richardson in 2002, and she said it was a perfect combination of acupuncture and hypnosis, which I was already trained in, and that proved to be true. I learned it from Gary Craig's website, and then my first EFT teacher really was Carol Look, who was one of the EFT masters. And then I did group work for many years on my own, just leading groups, and then eventually in 2009 I started a small practice to do coaching, and I've done that, and I got the Certified Energy Health Practitioner through the ACEP organization, and then just started doing online coaching in the last year so I can work with people all around the world. So that's been a lot of fun. Okay. So the chakras, just really looking back at the ancient, Hindu and Indian traditions of the energy, the wheels of energy that are located in different parts of the body that appear to correlate with the location of endocrine glands, and those energy centers are the way that the energy field translates into the physical level. They're like reducing valves or energy channels that how the metaphysical energy around us gets into the body and keeps us in balance. And so those energy centers are important to different concepts that generally correlate to the developmental stages of life. So that the first chakra is what happened to you when you were 1 year old. The second chakra is when you were 2 years old. The third chakra is 3 and 4 years old, and then on up into the higher chakras. And the important thing to realize is that most of the action in the chakras is in the lower chakras for healing, because everyone wants to be in the upper chakras with intuition and speaking your truth and connected to the divine. But until you clean up the lower three chakras, the energy doesn't flow up into the higher chakras very effectively. So, well, I think of the body itself as the unconscious mind. So much of what psychologists refer to as the subconscious, I think of as being stored in the body and in the energy field. So yeah, both of those work for me. That's a pretty typical story from the breast cancer dreamers. We'll talk about that. And I do believe that many diseases have a somatic metaphor associated with them, so that there's some message from your subconscious is getting translated out in your body, like your life story comes out in your body in some meaningful way. And in order to heal, you need to really tap into that message, figure out what the body wants, and give it what it wants. And the same thing is, I've started to make the analogy that somatic metaphors, the best way to deal with those are to treat them as if we're actually in a waking dream here while we're conscious. And just like we do dream interpretation on the symbols that we get from our dream life, you can treat the waking life the same way. So I would interpret physical symptoms the same way I interpret dream symbols, as if this is a waking dream and you're having this experience. And just like one of the goals in dreaming is to have a lucid dream and wake up in the dream, you'd also like to do the same thing when you're in the waking dream. You'd like to wake up in the dream and realize, oh, this is just a dream. These are symbols I can work with, and makes it a lot healthier way to deal with your body than just shooting the messenger when the message has come through. So. Yes. Yeah, the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, the ACEP organization, which is energypsych.org. I also find the Rhine Center, which is rhine.org, just like the river Rhine. And then also the International Association for near-death studies, iands.org, IANDS.org, and then also the International Association for the Study of Dreams, which is asdreams.org. So that's, yeah, those are useful as well. I've been involved with those in the past, not so much anymore. But. Well, so it's a good way to conclude this hour. So, um, two things that give me hope. One is in terms of speaking specifically to Donald Trump. I look at him as the manifestation of the Jungian shadow. So he's the shadow president. He's also the trickster president, since you never know what he's going to tweet next. And in Native American traditions, the trickster is obviously an important healing character. And then finally, he's the apocalyptic president. And apocalypse, people need to be reminded that does not mean Armageddon at the end of the world. Apocalypse means everything will be revealed. It's the revelation. So, and Trump is known for saying things that half the population is thinking, but no one else would dare to say. So he blurts out the shadow elements. And when you look at the result of that, so many things have been revealed during this presidential cycle, from the Democratic National Committee corruption through WikiLeaks, through all the other scandals that have been revealed. And then if you look at what's happened since he's been president, here we had the first thing that happened was they pulled down all the Confederate monuments in all the states. That would have never happened if Clinton had been president. We had the Me Too movement. Probably wouldn't have happened if Clinton had been president. And so there's this he's turned out to catalyze a lot of people finally taking action about things. And I'm sure the same thing is true of what's going on with the environment as well. So there needs to be a Me Too movement for the environment. And so I get up every day and I'm curious to see what's going to be revealed next. So I no longer take it personally. I think Trump is playing his role as the trickster to the hilt. Couldn't have picked a better man for the job. And if Hillary had been elected, it had been the same thing for women that Obama did for blacks. Everyone go, oh, great, we got a black president. Oh, great, we got a woman president. And nothing would have changed for the women, like nothing changed for the blacks during Obama's presidency. So I think it's all happened. I'm encouraged by that one line from the Desiderata. Regardless of whether it's clear to you or not, it's likely that the universe is unfolding as it should be. So I'm trusting the process. Now, the other reason I do that is because I spend a lot of time reading books and talking to near-death experiencers who tell us, that bring back the big message that it's all about being connected through unconditional love, and that's where we're headed. And if you look at what's really going on the planet, according to statistics, about 5% of people have had near-death experiences. And they come back with this message of no fear of death, altruistic sense of purpose, psychic abilities, healing abilities. Essentially, how I spin this is that they're embodying the Christ consciousness. Okay, these people are the living embodiment of Christ, and they have not only been resuscitated, they've been resurrected. Okay, so they are the physical manifestation of the second coming. And when you look at it like that, and you think 5% of how many 6 billion people, that's 300 million people on the planet have come back with this. It's a huge number of people. It's a critical mass that's shifting the planetary consciousness. And Teilhard de Chardin said that we're moving toward the convergence point, which is the goal of evolution. And that's the further evolution of consciousness. And I think the real big irony of this whole conversation is that we started resuscitating people back in the 1950s when they invented the ventricular defibrillator. So this mass awakening is a byproduct of our technology. I kind of like that. It's a byproduct. Yes, a side effect. I saw you mention Dean Radin. I would definitely include Dean Radin. Now, are you only talking to scientists? Okay. Well, Rupert Sheldrake for sure. Yeah, Rupert Sheldrake. The other people who I would think would be of interest, obviously, Dawson Church, and also my new friend from Australia, whose name is escaping me at the moment. Yeah, and Peter Stapleton. Yes, Peter Stapleton. Stapleton. Yeah, and yeah, they are the first few that come to mind. I also find Gabor Mate to be a very powerful voice in this whole field. So my simple explanation I give to everybody is every trauma we have is experienced as a malware program getting downloaded into our meridian system. Everybody likes computer metaphors, so everybody knows what a malware program is. A program you never asked for, and it got downloaded against your will. So, and then it's stored in a file up in your limbic system in your brain with a picture, a story, and a program. And much like the military veterans who have flashbacks all night long, the program will run whenever it's triggered, and then your body will go back to the original scene of the trauma as an energetic flashback. And so all we do with EFT is we're intentionally running the program. Then you hit the delete key over and over again and uninstall the program. And that metaphor works quite well according to the latest in neurophysiology, and that it's called memory reconsolidation, because when you open a memory and then you do something to it and then you save it again, it's not the same memory as it was before. So that's, people really like that explanation. So I would just, from the dreaming point of view, I'd recommend people keep a dream diary and learn to do tapping. So those are my two take-home points: tap and dream. So excellent. All right.